Hi, this is Robert Rickover, an Alexander Technique teacher in Omaha, Nebraska, and my guest is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. And as is kind of obvious, she's sitting in a chair, and we've had an earlier conversation about what are called power poses. Um, do you want to say a word or two about what they are? The woman named Amy Cuddy, who gave a really well-known TED talk, and
Yeah, they are expansive postures, positions that you put yourself in. That the premise was that they help with feelings of confidence in yourself. There was some initial research which seemed to suggest that even, your stress levels, cortisol would go down and your testosterone would go up. But those results, have, my understanding, have not been able to be replicated anywhere.
Mhm.
But there have been many studies that show a correlation between posture and mood. So I think
Right,
there's something,
right.
something.
So we've done a part of a video, which I'll put a link to by this one because it'll kind of give the bigger framework of things. But I think we've demonstrated pretty clearly that uh, there are a couple of really powerful enhancements that can be made to power poses that A, give them more longevity, and B, make them more powerful. And one is pretty much based on, I would say, biomechanics, and the other very much on the Alexander technique. And what I realized after we had done that first conversation, we were assuming, as I think Amy Cuddy did in all of her examples, I might be wrong about this, she was assuming that a person would be standing. Am I correct about that? Or that was her main thrust?
I'm trying to remember. I think they were all standing. I might not remember exactly, but the ones I remember are the Wonder Woman Superman stance, the V for
Yeah,
victory. She
right.
had one that was sort of like this or something. I can't remember like
Oh,
why,
okay. Yeah.
but I can't really remember properly.
I mean, I
Um,
see these as the kind of things that if you're going into someone's office or into a committee that's going to evaluate you and you're walking through a door and you want to make the best possible first impression and you want to feel more confident, that you might do these ahead of time.
yeah, you don't do them when you get in the
No, you
room.
definitely don't do them in
I
the
do want to just pop in here though, that
yeah.
this is why I think the Alexander technique is brilliant, because you can give yourself directions
Mhm.
that help you be more expansive and open, just
Mhm.
in however you're sitting and
Oh, sure.
standing, and so that you can have a little piece of what the expansive posture might give you within however you are.
Right. You may
So
have forgotten to do your power poses before you walked in, and then
mhm,
you realized, oh, I do have, if you had the tools
mhm.
of the Alexander technique, you could use those. But also, you could do the power poses, and I think the assumption that Amy Cuddy made was you would do them, they do raise your center of gravity, they do create a more expansive self, and that some of that would just carry over a bit into your entrance into the
Yeah,
room.
absolutely. And when I first came across them, I thought Alexander was perfect to pair with them, because you could be bringing your habitual contractions or something to an expansive pose and not get the full benefit of being, more at ease and open. Um, Yeah,
Right.
you're not getting the full benefit of them. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And but what I think was what we did not cover is what happens if you're sitting and you want to maybe not so much in an interview situation, but maybe just at home, sitting in front of your computer, and you want to have a little more expansiveness. And yes, you could use the Alexander technique to do that, but I think you could maybe get even more by using it in conjunction with a kind of modified power pose. So as you're sitting there right now, first of all, the relevant center of gravity of you as you're sitting is pretty much the bottom of your sternum, which anyone watching this could just trace their sternum down, and suddenly there's a little gap. So that's the end of the sternum, basically. So yeah. So if you were, for example, to raise your arms up, don't try to force anything here, but just as far as you can comfortably do, and then lower them back onto your legs. You might even from that feel a little something, but I think you could magnify that pretty dramatically by using an Alexander direction, and there's so many to choose from, but you could use I'm free to raise my arms. And then you could say or think to yourself, as I lower my arms, that's all I'm doing, just the arms. I'm leaving my torso alone. You might notice a little more of an expansion, or you could think, really, I'm free to raise my arms. And it doesn't have to be like this. It could be like that. That's raising your center quite a bit, actually. Just whatever is comfortable. You don't know, we're not trying to, push the limits here. I'm free to raise my arms. And then on the way down, put a little attention on your center of gravity and say, I'm not depressing it. Or I'm free to raise my arms and I'm not compressing myself as I lower my arms. These are all just different possibilities. And you could continue with that thought, I'm not compressing myself, or I'm not pulling my center of gravity down. And it could last as long as you can easily continue that direction. Now, in the real world, you're going to get distracted pretty quickly, but you might get, a minute or so of enhanced upness from that. So that's one thing. I just wanted to point out that could work really well seated.
Yeah.
But now here's another version of that may or may not be suitable for public encounters. Let's try this one.
Okay.
And this one is going to look vaguely
You mean
familiar.
I'm gonna do it in public?
I'm going to do it at the same time. We're both this one. Well, I'll just show you first, and you'll see. Instead of raising my arms like this, I could say, well, I'm just going to gently rest my hands on top of my head.
Okay. You want me to do it too?
Yes, why not? Yeah. And then put them back down on your legs. And maybe you notice a little change or not. We could then add some freedom thoughts to that, or Alexander directions. And on the way down, it's just my arms. That's the only thing that's going down. The rest of me is being left alone. Or I could do it in terms of center of gravity. What did you notice doing that?
Definitely a similar effect. For some reason, I like my arms not on my head, but that's just but
Some,
I can see that there's some. I used to do a thing that came from something, I think, in the back trouble book,
uh-huh.
that ended up with arms or hands resting on your head, and it was kind of, it gave you something instead of being pushed down, it gave you something to meet.
Well,
I don't know if that's where you're going, but anyway, it just reminded me a
well,
little bit of
yeah, it
that.
relates to that. I I've had Alexander teachers. I think Walter Carrington used to do this sometimes, where he would actually just
Yeah,
gently press down. And the idea was, it was a very gentle pressing, but the idea was it would sort of stimulate a reaction to
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I assume that he got that from Alexander. I don't know. But the other thing about this way of spending some time in a meeting, this is,
You could
you will
do
sometimes,
that.
yeah, you could. And there, it's not something, I'm sure you've seen people do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I have to
Yeah.
say, probably mostly the people you saw
Men.
doing it were men. Yes. It's maybe you could even think of it as a manly asserting of manly privilege or something.
Yeah, it
I don't
seems like a
know.
bit of that kind of how men take up space
Yeah,
and women make
yeah,
themselves
yeah,
smaller.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought I would throw that out there. I just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of add on to our previous discussion
Yeah.
that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I actually have a little, I don't know what you call it, a little practice that I do with a lot of my students, which can be done sitting or standing, and we use our directions while we're doing it. But it's basically raising your arms up into the air, and it's bringing them back down, and using not exactly the same directions that you said, but it could be those, it could be whatever we're working with at the time. But the idea is, as the arms come down, that you're leaving this part alone and getting the benefit of
You're
that.
getting the benefit of,
yeah. But we call it we call this the corkscrew,
because
because
you could keep
it, like,
repeating.
there's
Yeah.
there's corkscrew, so it's kind of like what,
Yeah.
Anyway, so but it seems like in very much in the same
it's
frame.
down
Yeah,
to come up, or to,
down to come up,
and maybe even not so much down to come up, but down to not come down.
not, yeah
in the rest of you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I just wanted to extend it to sitting. It'd be a great thing to do if you're sitting at a desk and you don't want to take a break for a walk, or actually do something more like constructive rest or some other activity that would give you some expansion or some, because if you
actually,
yeah,
this is reminding me where I initially got my ideas from that, and I mentioned this part came from the Deborah Kaplan back trouble book, and she suggested this sort of stretch to do intermittently if you're sitting at your desk for a long time to help,
So yeah, you could see it as a stretch. I mean, it is a little bit of a stretch, but I see it more in terms of just basic biomechanics. When I bring my hands up here, I've raised my center of gravity significantly.
Yeah. She was using
and if I decide
I
don't want it to go back down just because my arms are coming down, I can just be very clear about that by saying I'm not pulling my center down, or whatever.
I'm not compressing myself.
Not compressing. I mean, there's zillions of directions that could be at play here. And I think it's going to work best if you use a direction on the way up. So it's a nice clean movement. I'm free to do this or whatever. And then not compressing on the way down. So anyway, that's something that you could do at your desk and not have to get up and necessarily walk around or do something to take away.
What you might be able to do, even as a woman, sitting at your desk is sort of just stretch with your arms, and if you're just at,
Depends on
but
your
you
work
could.
environment.
It does depend on your working. I mean, I don't mean at a meeting or something. Well, who knows?
Yeah.
But if you're just at your desk, when people do stretch and things, but you can choose to add these directions into your stretch and get a little more
which will make
benefit.
them much more powerful. It'll be more than just the changing of your positions, and so it'll actually be an internal reorganization, which is what we want. And even if the effects don't last for a long time, they'll last longer if you use a direction. And I think what you're getting is kind of a taste of what Alexander offers, the Alexander technique offers. It's kind of you could even think of it a little bit as a gimmick to get some of those Alexander effects pretty easily and simply without a lot of training, let's say. Because I mean, we've just done it, and I think anyone watching could probably pretty much do what we just did. Okay, anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. This is fun.
Okay, so my guest today has been Imogen Ragone. I'll put a link to her site, a link to a site where you can learn more about the Alexander technique, and I'll put a link to our previous video on this. It goes into a lot more detail about power poses in general, but this is just kind of a part 2 of that. So, Imogen, thank you so much.
Thank you.